The rain fell in steady sheets, turning the sidewalks of Manhattan into rivers that reflected the blurry glow of traffic lights. Kate Morrison tugged her coat tighter around her small frame, her purse strap slipping from her shoulder for the third time that morning. She hated Mondays. She hated being early for work and still feeling like she was running late for life itself. The city moved too fast, its people striding with purpose, umbrellas bobbing like dark shields above them. Kate, meanwhile, struggled to find her rhythm, her steps hesitant, her thoughts already consumed by whether her blouse was too plain for the office or if anyone would notice that her shoes were from a discount store. Inside the cafe on the corner of 48th, the warmth of roasted beans and cinnamon wrapped around her like a promise of comfort. She shook raindrops from her hair and stepped into the line, pressing her lips together in that nervous way she always did when she felt out of place. The baristas shouted orders over the hiss of steaming milk. People in tailored suits tapped impatiently on their phones. Kate studied the menu, even though she knew exactly what she would order. Double cappuccino, no sugar, an almond croissant she probably couldn't justify. It was habit. This pretending to deliberate, as if she belonged in a world of decisiveness. By the time she reached the counter, her voice was barely above a murmur. Double cappuccino, no sugar, almond croissant, please. The cashier, a girl with neon green nails and an expression of practiced indifference, nodded and typed it in. Kate fumbled with coins, cheeks heating as the line behind her shifted impatiently. She hated drawing attention to herself. She hated the reminder that she didn't quite fit here. When her coffee was ready, Kate accepted it with relief. She turned toward the crowded tables, searching for a free seat when it had. Pop and salt, sir. A man in a gray wool coat moved abruptly from the sugar station, his tall frame cutting across her path. His cup jerked, and in that split second, so did hers. The collision was swift and brutal. The scalding liquid splashed across her blouse and down his trousers. Gasps rose from the nearby customers as the smell of bitter coffee filled the air. Kate froze, her eyes on the spreading stain across the only blouse she owned that made her feel professional. Panic surged in her chest, hot and suffocating. "Oh no. I'm so sorry." His voice cut through her thoughts, deep, resonant, carrying an accent she couldn't place. He was already grabbing napkins, his movements quick, almost frantic. "I wasn't paying attention. Let me." She looked up, ready to wave him off with awkward politeness, but the words caught in her throat. His eyes were the color of storm clouds just before they broke, intense, searching, filled with something that startled her. Mortification, yes, but also curiosity. A scar traced his chin, faint yet sharp enough to suggest a story, and when he offered a crooked smile, apologetic and self-deprecating, something inside her shifted. "It's fine," she stammered, though her voice betrayed her nerves. "Accidents happen." But it didn't feel fine. The cafe seemed to hush around them, the chatter dimming as though the city itself had paused to watch. Kate's blouse clung damply to her skin. Humiliation prickled at her eyes. She wanted to disappear, to slip back into the rain, and let Manhattan swallow her whole. He extended the napkins, his hand steady despite the mess. "At least let me pay for dry cleaning. Or better yet, there's a store 2 blocks from here. I can buy you a new blouse." Her instinct was to refuse, to shrink from the generosity of a stranger, but when she opened her mouth, the only sound was a nervous laugh. His presence was overwhelming, like a flame too close to her skin, and yet she didn't pull away. "I'm Troy," he said finally, as if the name might soften the disaster between them. Troy Castellanos, and apparently also the most uncoordinated man in Manhattan. Despite the embarrassment, Kate felt a smile tug at her lips. Something about the way he looked at her, not just at her face, but through her, into her, was disarming. "Kate," she whispered. "Kate Morrison." "Kate," he repeated, letting the syllables roll off his tongue as if testing them. His smile deepened, crooked but sincere. In that instant, with rain still dripping from her hair and coffee cooling on her blouse, Kate felt something she hadn't in a long time. Seen. Not the careful, invisible girl she had always been, but someone worth noticing. And as their eyes held, hers wide with surprise, his lit with quiet intensity, it was as if an invisible thread had tied itself between them, pulling taut. It was just coffee, just an accident in a crowded city, but deep down, Kate knew this wasn't just an accident, it was the beginning of everything. The rain had stopped by the time Kate reached her office, but the image of storm-colored eyes and a crooked smile followed her through the day like a haunting melody she couldn't escape. She tried to bury herself in spreadsheets and numbers, the comfort of order and predictability, but every time she glanced at the damp stain on her blouse, she thought of him, Troy Castellanos, a name that sounded like it belonged in glossy magazines or whispered conversations, not spoken awkwardly in a crowded cafe. That evening, as the city lights flickered on like a million restless stars, Kate sat by her apartment window, clutching the cream-colored business card he had slipped into her hand before they parted. His name was embossed in gold, Castellanos and Associates printed beneath it. She traced the letters with her fingertip, torn between curiosity and fear. Men like M did not linger in the lives of women like her. She knew it. Yet her chest tightened with something dangerously close to hope. 3 weeks passed in a blur. She told herself she had imagined the connection, that it was nothing more than a kind stranger trying to make amends. But late at night, when Mr. Whiskers purred beside her on the couch, she caught herself whispering the name Troy, as if saying it aloud might summon him again. On the night of the company gala at the Plaza Hotel, Kate stood near the entrance, her navy dress clinging softly to her nerves. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and polished marble, the air thick with the scent of perfume and money. She clutched her champagne glass like a shield, forcing herself to smile at coworkers who seemed born for this world. She wasn't. She knew she wasn't. Still, she had promised herself she would at least try. And then she felt it. That pull, that invisible current that made the hairs on her arms rise before she even turned her head. Across the sea of gowns and tuxedos, Troy stood at the doorway, tall, composed, devastating in black. His eyes swept the room until they found hers, and in that instant, the noise around her dissolved. It was as if the city had shrunk to the space between them. He began walking toward her, each step deliberate, his gaze locked with hers as though nothing and no one else existed. Kate's heart thudded painfully, her breath shallow. She told herself to look away, to hide, to flee, but her body betrayed her. She couldn't move. When he reached her, the world seemed to exhale. "Kate Morrison," he said, his voice smooth and rich, carrying both warmth and something far more dangerous. "What a surprise to see you here." She fought for composure, clutching her glass tighter. "Troy, I didn't know you would be here." "Business," he replied, but his eyes never left hers. "And fate, it seems." The word lingered between them like a spell. Kate wanted to laugh, to dismiss it. But deep inside, she felt it too. Fate. A thread pulling them together despite logic, despite reason. She had never believed in such things. Yet here she was, trembling in the middle of a ballroom because of one man. As the music swelled and people drifted toward the dance floor, Troy leaned closer, his breath brushing her ear. "I meant to make a better first impression than spilled coffee. Tonight, let me try again." Kate's pulse quickened. Every instinct warned her to retreat, to guard the fragile walls she had built around her heart. But another voice, deeper, stronger, whispered that this was no accident. This was the beginning of a storm she could not stop, even if she tried. And in his eyes, she saw it. The promise of danger, of passion, of something that could break her or save her. Suspense curled through her chest like fire. She knew, without understanding how, that her life was about to change forever. The music pulsed through the ballroom like a living heartbeat, violins rising over the murmur of conversation and the clink of crystal glasses. Kate felt the weight of 100 glittering eyes around her, but none of them mattered. All she could see was Troy, standing close enough that the warmth of his presence made her forget the chill of her insecurities. He extended his hand, not like a stranger demanding, but like a man daring her to step into a world she wasn't sure she belonged in. "Dance with me," he said, his voice low, threaded with something that felt more like a command than a request. Kate's breath caught. She wanted to protest,
to retreat into the safety of quiet corners and polite small talk, but his gaze pinned her in place. Her trembling hand slipped into his, and he led her toward the dance floor. The chandeliers threw golden sparks across his dark hair, and when, his arm wrapped firmly around her waist, she nearly forgot how to breathe. The orchestra swelled, and suddenly they were moving together, her body guided by his in perfect rhythm, as if they had danced like this in another lifetime. Kate tried to keep her eyes on the pattern of their steps, but she couldn't resist looking up at him. His storm blue eyes were locked on her, studying her with unnerving intensity. "You're nervous," he murmured. "Of course I am," she whispered back. "Everyone is staring." "Let them stare," he said, tightening his hold just slightly. "I'm not dancing with them. I'm dancing with you." Her heart skipped. The words shouldn't have mattered, not in a place where appearances and performances meant everything, but with him they carried weight. Dangerous weight. She felt the edge of something unknown beneath his charm, something that stirred a mix of fear and excitement deep inside her. As the music slowed, he leaned closer, his lips almost grazing her ear. "I'm curious about you, Kate Morrison. You don't quite fit here, do you?" The bluntness made her stiffen. He had seen through her polished dress, her practiced smile, straight to the girl from Ohio who still checked the price of every coffee she bought. "I don't know what you mean," she tried to say lightly, but her voice faltered. He pulled back just enough to look at her. His smile was there, crooked and disarming, but his eyes told a different story. "You're hiding something. Maybe not a secret exactly, but yourself." The words pierced her. Before she could respond, the song ended and polite applause filled the air. Troy didn't release her hand. Instead, he led her off the floor and into the shadowed corridor behind the ballroom. The laughter and chatter dulled into a distant hum, replaced by the soft echo of their footsteps. Kate's pulse quickened. Why here? Why away from everyone? She wanted to ask, but the words tangled in her throat.
Troy stopped near a tall window overlooking the city lights, the rain still dripping on the glass outside. He turned to her, and for the first time she saw past the confidence that radiated from him. There was a flicker of something raw, something unguarded. "I've spent years surrounded by people who only wanted the version of me they could use," Troy said quietly. "The polished man with money, connections, power. But when I look at you, I see someone who isn't blinded by all that. That terrifies me more than you know." Kate swallowed hard, her chest tightening. "Why me?" she whispered. "Because you're real," he answered, his eyes locking onto hers, "and I don't know what that's going to cost either of us." The sound of footsteps echoed suddenly down the corridor, sharp against marble floors. A tall woman appeared, dressed in emerald silk, her expression unreadable. Kate recognized her instantly. Isabella Russo, a name she'd only seen in magazines, a woman who looked as though she belonged to Troy's world in every possible way. Troy's jaw tightened, his body shifting subtly, as though bracing for impact. Kate's stomach twisted, a storm of dread rising inside her. Isabella smiled faintly, her eyes flicking between Kate and Troy. "Well, well," she said, her voice smooth as honey but carrying a bite beneath. "This is unexpected." Kate's fingers curled against her dress. Suspense hung thick in the air, heavier than the rain outside. She didn't know why, but she sensed that whatever happened next would change everything. The air between them felt brittle, like glass ready to shatter. Isabella's eyes lingered on Kate with a coolness that made her skin prickle. She stepped closer, her perfume sharp and intoxicating, the kind that announced power before words ever did. Kate wanted to move, to step back, but her heels felt nailed to the marble floor. Troy's arm shifted slightly, the protective gesture subtle but undeniable. Isabella's gaze flicked to it, a faint smirk curving her lips. "So this is the girl," she said, her tone dripping with something Kate couldn't quite name. "Amusing, unexpected, bold of you, Troy." Kate's stomach dropped. Her heart hammered so loud she was sure both of them could hear it. Troy's voice cut in, calm but laced with steel. "Isabella, this isn't the time." She ignored him, her eyes trained on Kate like a predator sizing up prey. "Tell me, dear, do you really think you understand the world you've stepped into?" Do you think men like Troy keep their attention long on sweet little things who don't know the rules? The words burned through Kate, cruel in their precision. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Every insecurity she had buried clawed its way back to the surface. The dress that had felt so bold hours earlier suddenly felt borrowed, flimsy, a costume in a play where she had no script. Troy stepped forward, his voice low, dangerous. Enough. But Isabella only laughed, a sound that sparkled like glass breaking. I wonder, Troy, do you ever tell them the truth? Or do you just let them believe they're special until the world shows them otherwise? For a moment, Kate saw something flicker across Troy's face, pain, sharp and unguarded, before he masked it again with practiced composure. He turned to Kate, his hand brushing hers, a small gesture meant to anchor her, but it only deepened the storm inside her chest. Kate's mind raced. She should walk away, escape this charged corridor with its hidden daggers, but something inside her refused. She forced herself to lift her chin, her voice trembling but steady enough to be heard. I don't need you to explain him to me, she said to Isabella, surprising even herself. If there's truth to know, he'll tell me.
For the first time, Isabella's perfect smile faltered, just slightly before she slipped back into elegance. Brave words, she murmured, turning her gaze back to Troy. But bravery and survival are not the same. With that, she glided away, her heels clicking against marble until her figure dissolved into the golden glow of the ballroom. Silence settled, heavy and suffocating. Troy ran a hand through his hair, exhaling slowly. She thrives on intimidation, he said, his voice softer now. Don't let her get inside your head. Kate searched his face, unsettled by the shadows there. Who is she, really? Someone who knows too much, he answered, his eyes darkening. Someone who likes to test how far she can push. Kate wanted to believe him, to let the warmth of his hand erase the cold bite of Isabella's words, but doubt had already taken root. She had glimpsed something tonight, something beneath Troy's confident exterior, and it both frightened and fascinated her. As they stepped back into the ballroom, the music swelled, laughter rippled through the crowd, and everything looked perfect again. But Kate knew perfection was only the surface. Something dangerous stirred beneath, and it was only a matter of time before it broke through. The days after the gala slipped by in a haze that Kate couldn't shake. At work, she stared at spreadsheets but saw only Isabella's smirk. At night, she lay awake listening to the hum of the city, wondering if the cruel words had been meant as poison or warning. Troy had brushed it off, insisting Isabella thrived on intimidation, but the flicker of pain she had seen in his eyes haunted her more than anything Isabella had said. Troy called, texted, even showed up outside her office with that crooked smile that always unraveled her defenses, but doubt now lingered in every glance, every touch. He had let her see cracks in his armor, shadows in his paw, so that he wasn't ready to explain. Kate wanted to trust him, but trust for her was like glass. Once broken, it could never return to its perfect form. One evening, Troy invited her to dinner at a quiet Italian restaurant tucked away in a narrow side street. The candles flickered against exposed brick walls, the air heavy with garlic and basil. Kate arrived with her heart racing, torn between the urge to confront him and the desperate need to hold on to whatever was growing between them. He stood when she entered, his eyes lighting up, but there was tension in his posture. He pulled out her chair with practiced ease, but she noticed the way his fingers drummed the table when he thought she wasn't looking. Something was gnawing at him. They ordered wine, pasta, and for a while pretended everything was normal. Troy told a story about a disastrous meeting where a billionaire investor had confused one of his executives with a waiter. Kate laughed politely, but her mind was elsewhere. Finally, she set her glass down, her voice barely steady. Troy, who exactly is Isabella to you? The question froze him. His smile vanished. For a long moment he just stared at her, the storm behind his eyes tightening. Finally he leaned back, exhaling. She's complicated. Family in a way. My cousin's wife. But she has her own agenda, and she knows exactly how to twist a knife when she wants to. Kate searched his face for deception but found only weariness. Still, the unease refused to leave her chest. If she's family, why did it feel like she knew secrets you don't want to share? Troy's jaw clenched, his voice dropping. Because she does. She knows about the betrayal that almost cost me everything. She knows how I lost people I once trusted, and she enjoys reminding me. Kate's pulse quickened. The betrayal. He had mentioned it once, but only vaguely. She leaned forward. What really happened? Pinhead, Troy. His gaze darkened, and for a moment she thought he would tell her, but then his phone buzzed on the table, the name flashing across the screen. Marcus Castellanos.
Troy's cousin, Isabella's husband. Kate's stomach sank. Troy silenced the phone quickly, too quickly, shoving it into his pocket as if it were a live grenade. Not tonight, he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Tonight I just want to be here with you. But Kate couldn't unsee the flash of fear, the shadows creeping back into his expression. She twirled her pasta without tasting it, her appetite gone. For the first time since she had met him, she realized there was an entire world orbiting Troy Castellanos that she didn't understand. A world that might swallow her whole if she stepped too close. Later that night, as they walked through the rain-washed streets, Troy pulled her close, his arm wrapping around her as if to shield her from everything. Kate wanted to believe in that safety, to believe that love was stronger than secrets. But as she looked at his profile under the glow of the streetlights, a chilling thought burrowed into her chest. What if Isabella had been right? The city was quiet that night, the kind of quiet that made every shadow seem alive. Kate stood by her apartment window, watching the rain trace crooked lines down the glass, her heart pounding with a storm of its own. She had let Troy walk her home, his hand warm against hers the entire way. But now that they were inside, the silence between them was charged with something heavier than words. Troy had removed his coat, draping it over the back of a chair, his shirt slightly damp from the rain. He looked at her, not with the polished charm he wore so easily in public, but with something raw, more dangerous. His eyes followed her movements, and she felt as though he was stripping away every layer of defense she had ever built. "You've been distant," he said finally, his voice low, steady, but edged with frustration. "Ever since Isabella. I need to know what you're thinking, Kate." She turned away, hugging her arms across her chest. The truth trembled on her lips, but speaking it felt like walking into fire. She had built her life around being careful, around hiding her insecurities so no one could use them against her. But Troy was different. He demanded honesty not with words, but with the intensity of his gaze. The way silence around him felt unbearable. "I saw you with her," she said softly. "I saw the way she touched your arm, the way she spoke to you like she knew parts of you I never will. And it hurt, Troy. It hurt more than I can explain." He moved toward her, each step deliberate, his presence filling the small space until she could hardly breathe. His hand lifted, brushing her chin so she would meet his eyes. "Kate, Isabella knows my past because she feeds on weakness. She saw what losing people I trusted did to me, and she knows exactly how to use that against me. But don't ever mistake her for someone who matters." Her eyes burned with tears. "Then why does it feel like she wins, even when you tell me she doesn't?" "Because you let her voice be louder than mine," he said, his words striking deep. "Do you think I would be here, night after night, if I wanted someone else?" Something inside Kate broke then, a dam of fear and longing bursting. She stepped closer, her voice shaking. "It hurts," she whispered. Her breath caught, and the words slipped out like a confession she could no longer hold back. "It hurts, but I crave more." Troy's eyes darkened, his jaw tightening, as if her words had struck him to his core. His hands cupped her face, his forehead resting against hers. "You're stronger than you know," he murmured, and in that moment his voice was not reassurance, but a vow. The kiss that followed was not tentative. It was fire meeting tinder, a clash of need and fear and desperate surrender. Kate's hands clung to him, pulling him closer, even as every nerve in her body screamed with the intensity. She had never let anyone this close, never dared to show so much of herself, and the vulnerability was terrifying. When he carried her to the bedroom, it wasn't with urgency, but with reverence, as though she was both fragile and unbreakable. Every touch was deliberate, every kiss a promise that he saw her, that he chose her. Yet even in the tenderness, there was an edge of something powerful, almost consuming,
that made her tremble with both fear and desire. The pain came first, sharp and unexpected, a gasp escaping her lips. She tried to turn away, ashamed of her tears, but Troy stilled instantly, his eyes searching hers with fierce concern. "Did I hurt you? Should we stop?" Kate shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "Don't stop. It hurts, but I want more." His expression softened, his thumb brushing away her tears. "Darling," he whispered, "you're stronger than you know." And with those words, the fear dissolved into something else, something deeper, rawer. She surrendered completely, not just her body but the parts of her soul she had always kept hidden. The night became a dance of vulnerability and discovery, of whispered promises and breaking barriers. When it was over, when she lay trembling in his arms with her head on his chest, Kate realized something terrifying and beautiful. She wasn't just falling in love with Troy Castellanos. She was becoming someone braver, someone who no longer hid in the shadows of doubt, and that realization was more dangerous than anything Isabella could ever say. Morning light spilled through the blinds in Kate's apartment, soft and golden, but it did little to calm the storm inside her. The night with Troy still burned in her memory, every word, every touch, every moment of surrender. She had never been so exposed, so vulnerable, and yet she had never felt so alive. His voice still echoed in her ears, "You're stronger than you know." But as the days passed, that strength was tested in ways she hadn't expected. It started with whispers at the O's. Fess. Sarah, her closest colleague, leaned against Kate's desk one afternoon, her eyes sharp with curiosity. "You've been glowing lately? Who is he?" The teasing smile faded when Kate admitted it was Troy Castellanos. Sarah's brows rose, her voice lowering. "Castellanos. Kate, do you even know what kind of world you're stepping into? Men like that don't fall for women like us. They play, they thrill, and then they move on." Kate forced a laugh, brushing it off, but Sarah's words stuck like thorns. At home, her mother's call only drove them deeper. "Katie, dear." Her mother's voice came through the line, warm but laced with concern. "You say he has money, power. That kind of man will change you. They'll make you feel small, make you question yourself until you don't recognize who you are. Promise me you're being careful." Kate promised, though the truth was she didn't know what careful meant anymore. Every time Troy touched her, the world blurred until nothing else mattered. And yet, when he was gone, the doubts grew louder. The doubts became screams when she attended a private dinner with Troy, surrounded by his colleagues and investors. The women there wore diamonds like second skins, their gowns shimmering under golden light. They glanced at Kate with polite smiles that cut deeper than open cruelty. She felt their eyes on her dress, simple compared to theirs, their manicured fingers brushing against wine glasses while whispering words she wasn't meant to hear. One of them, a blonde with a voice like broken glass, leaned close as Troy was pulled into a conversation across the room. "So, you're Kate. How fascinating. You're different from the women he usually entertains." Sweet. Ordinary. The way she said it turned the words into weapons. Kate forced a smile, her throat tight, her heart pounding. When Troy returned to her side, his hand brushing the small of her back, the blonde melted away with a smirk. Kate tried to shake it off, but the poison had already taken root.
Later that night, walking through the quiet streets, Kate finally let the words spill. "I don't belong in your world, Troy. I saw the way they looked at me. I heard what they whispered. I'm not enough." He stopped under the glow of a street lamp, turning to face her. His eyes burned with intensity, his voice fierce. "Don't you dare say that. You think I care about their world? Kate, I want you, not them, not their money, not their empty games. You." His conviction shook her, but doubt still lingered. And then, as if summoned by her fears, a figure appeared across the street. Isabella. She watched them from the shadows, her expression unreadable, her presence like a dagger cutting through the fragile moment. Kate's blood ran cold, Troy's jaw tightened, his hand gripping hers. He whispered without taking his eyes off Isabella, "She's testing us. Don't let her win." But in Kate's chest, the fear grew louder, because deep down, she knew Isabella wasn't just testing, she was waiting for the perfect moment to strike and tear them apart. The night Kate finally broke was colder than she expected. Autumn winds cut through the city, rattling branches against her apartment window, as though the world itself wanted to echo her turmoil. She sat curled on the couch, her phone heavy in her hand, the screen lit with Troy's missed calls. His voice still lingered in her memory, steady and certain, telling her she was stronger than she knew. But strength was not what she felt now. She felt small, fragile, like a thread ready to snap. The pressure had built with every glance, every whispered word, every reminder that she didn't belong in Troy's glittering world. At the office, Sarah's warnings grew sharper, disguised as concern. At home, her mother's doubts pressed harder, and in her heart, Isabella's voice echoed the loudest. Sweet, ordinary, do you really think he'll keep you? Those words had clawed into her like barbed wire. When Troy arrived that evening, his knock firm against the door, Kate's pulse quickened. She opened it, and there he stood, his coat draped over his shoulders, his storm-colored eyes fixed on her with a mix of determination and weariness. Kate, he said gently, we need to talk. She stepped aside, letting him in, but the silence was so thick it felt like a third presence between them. He moved closer, his hands reaching for hers, but she pulled away, her voice trembling. Troy, I can't do this anymore. His eyes darkened, his body stiffening. Can't do what? This? Us? She forced the words out, each one slicing her. I can't be the girl who is never enough. I can't keep standing beside you while the whole world waits for me to fail. For a moment he just stared at her, the silence deafening. Then he stepped forward, his voice sharp with pain. You think I chose you because you're ordinary? You think I would fight for you if you weren't everything I need? But she shook her head, tears spilling. You don't see it, Troy. Maybe you never will. Every time I walk into a room with you, I feel like I'm disappearing. And maybe one day you'll realize I was never what you wanted. The words hung in the air, crueler than she intended, but they were the truth of her fear. Troy's face hardened, his jaw tight as though he was fighting against something inside him. Finally, he whispered, if that's really what you believe, then I can't force you to stay. Kate's heart cracked, but she couldn't stop herself. She turned away, unable to watch the storm in his eyes. Please leave, Troy. There was a pause, long enough for her to hear the ache in his breathing, long enough for her to want to take it back. But then the sound of the door opening and closing left her in silence. The moment he was gone, the apartment felt colder, emptier, as if the walls themselves recoiled from her decision. Kate pressed her hands to her face, sobs breaking through her chest. She told herself she was protecting her heart, but all she felt was the hollow ache of loss. Meanwhile, across the city, Troy sat alone in his penthouse, a glass of whiskey untouched in his hand. For the first time in years, he allowed the memories to come. The betrayal, the lies, the night everything he built was nearly destroyed. And as Isabella's words rang in his mind, he realized she had gotten what she wanted. But what neither of them knew was that Isabella was not finished. From the shadows, she watched with satisfaction as the cracks widened between Kate and Troy. She held secrets powerful enough to destroy them both, and she intended to use them. The break had come, sharp and brutal, but the storm was only beginning. The storm returned on a night that seemed made for heartbreak. Rain slashed against the city streets, wind howled through the alleys, and thunder cracked above the rooftops as if the sky itself was raging. Kate walked quickly through the park, her umbrella useless against the downpour. She had left her apartment without a plan, driven only by the emptiness that had consumed her since the night she ended things with Troy. Every step felt like penance, every breath heavy with regret. She stopped near the fountain where they had once laughed together, drenched now in sheets of rain. Her chest ached as memories swirled, his hand on hers, his crooked smile, the way his voice wrapped around her like a shield. She whispered into the storm, words carried away by the wind. I'm sorry, Troy. And then she felt it, that same pull she had felt the first night they met. She turned, and there he was,
Troy stood under the rain, no umbrella, his coat soaked, his hair plastered to his forehead. His eyes locked on hers, and in that moment, the entire city seemed to fall silent. Kate froze, her lips trembling. Troy. He moved closer, water dripping from his coat, his gaze burning even through the storm. "You think I could just walk away from you?" he demanded, his voice breaking through the roar of thunder. "You think I haven't been dying every second without you?" Tears mingled with the rain on her cheeks. "I was scared," she confessed, her voice trembling. "Scared I wasn't enough. Scared I'd lose you before you ever really became mine." He stopped in front of her, his hands gripping her shoulders with fierce urgency. "Look at me, Kate." His voice was raw, desperate. "You're not enough because enough is too small a word. You're the best thing that has ever happened to me. Do you understand?" Her sob caught in her throat. The rain plastered her hair against her skin, but she didn't care. She looked into his eyes and saw no hesitation, no doubt, only truth. She reached for him, her fingers trembling as they brushed his jaw. "I'm still scared," she whispered. He pulled her closer, his forehead resting against hers. "So am I, Kate. But love isn't about being fearless. It's about choosing each other even when it terrifies us." The words shattered the last of her defenses. She threw her arms around him, clinging to him as if the storm might tear them apart if she let go. His lips found hers, the kiss fierce, hungry, filled with all the pain of their separation and all the hope of their reunion. The rain poured harder, thunder rolled, but in that moment, none of it mattered. They were no longer two people battling fear and doubt. They were one heartbeat, one breath, one desperate promise in the middle of a storm. When they finally pulled apart, Troy held her face in his hands, his eyes blazing. "No more running, Kate, no more doubt. If you fall, I'll catch you. If you break, I'll hold you together. But don't you ever think you're not what I want. You're everything."
Kate's chest heaved as she tried to breathe through the flood of emotions. She nodded, her tears mixing with rain. "I believe you." They stood there in the storm, soaked to the bone, but reborn in love. What neither of them noticed was the figure watching from the edge of the park, an umbrella tilted just enough to shield her face. Isabella's eyes gleamed in the lightning flash, her lips curving into a smile. Their love had survived the storm, but Isabella still held the lightning. Morning light spilled through Kate's apartment, golden and soft, as if the world itself had decided to grant them a reprieve after the storm. She lay in bed, curled against Troy's chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. For the first time in weeks, she felt peace, fragile, trembling, but real. His arm was wrapped around her, anchoring her, and she almost believed that nothing could touch them now. Almost. Troy stirred, pressing a kiss into her hair. "Good morning, beautiful," he murmured, his voice rough from sleep. She smiled against his chest. "Good morning." For a few blissful minutes, they stayed like that, whispering about pancakes and coffee, about ordinary things that felt extraordinary simply because they were together. But peace never lingers too long when shadows wait outside the door. A knock shattered the quiet. 3 sharp raps, deliberate and cold. Kate's heart leapt, dread rushing through her veins. At this hour, it could only mean trouble. Troy sat up, his jaw tightening as the knock came again. "Stay here," he said, slipping from the bed. He pulled on his shirt, his movements tense, his body humming with the instinct of a man who had seen storms return after the calm. Kate sat up, clutching the sheets, her breath caught in her throat. When Troy opened the door, the last person she wanted to see stood there. Isabella, immaculate as always, her blonde hair untouched, yet by the morning wind, her smile sharp as glass. Troy's entire frame stiffened. "What are you doing here, Isabella?" Isabella stepped inside without invitation, her heels clicking against the floor. "I came to congratulate you," she said smoothly, her eyes flicking toward Kate, who had emerged from the bedroom doorway, wrapped in a robe. Her gaze lingered on Kate with quiet disdain before returning to Troy. "You've made your choice." Kate's stomach twisted. There was something in Isabella's tone that wasn't quite congratulatory. It was mocking, layered with something far more dangerous. Troy crossed his arms, his voice low and cold. Whatever game you're playing, end it here. Isabella's smile deepened. A game? Oh, Troy, you think this is a game? Her voice dropped, silk hiding steel. Then let me give you something real. Do you remember the contract your company signed 2 years ago with Russo International? The one that pulled you out of the fire? Troy's eyes narrowed. Of course. Well, here's the twist, Isabella said, her gaze sliding toward Kate like a blade. That contract has a clause that allows us to pull our investment if certain reputational risks arise. And believe me, Troy, your new choice, she emphasized the word, makes for a very interesting risk. The room fell silent. Kate felt the floor tilt beneath her, her heart hammering as the implication landed. Isabella wasn't just an old flame or a jealous distraction. She was holding a weapon over Troy's entire company, over everything he had built. Troy stepped forward, his voice sharp. Don't you dare drag her into this. But Isabella only tilted her head, her eyes gleaming. Oh, I already have. She turned toward Kate, her words venom wrapped in velvet. You see, darling, men like Troy don't get to choose love freely, not when fortunes and legacies are involved, and when it comes down to choosing between you and very thing he's built. Well, let's see how strong you both really are.
She walked to the door, her perfume lingering like poison, and paused with one final strike. I'll give you time to decide, but time runs out quickly in this city. Then she was gone, leaving silence heavier than any storm. Kate's hands shook as she clutched the robe tighter. Troy turned, his eyes burning with fury and fear. Kate, listen to me. She doesn't matter. She can't touch what we have. But Kate's heart twisted. She had finally allowed herself to believe in forever. And now the cruel world outside had broken through their walls. She whispered the words that echoed from the night before. It hurts. Troy crossed the room in 2 strides, pulling her into his arms, his voice fierce against her ear. But I crave more. And you're stronger than you know. Yet even as he held her, Kate couldn't shake the feeling that Isabella's shadow was still in the room, a storm waiting to strike again.
New York burned bright beneath the night sky, every tower a shard of glass reflecting neon and gold. Horns blared below on the avenues, but up here on the rooftop bar, the chaos softened into something refined, almost surreal. Jazz drifted lazily from a corner stage, mingling with the chime of crystal glasses and the low rumble of conversations carried by men and women who moved through life as if the city belonged to them. The air smelled faintly of expensive perfume and cigar smoke, the perfume of power. At the far end, Ethan Carter sat with a glass of whiskey untouched in his hand, his gaze fixed on the skyline, but his mind wasn't with the towers or the light. They were background noise, as predictable as the numbers that filled his company's quarterly reports. 32 years old, CEO of Carter Technologies, prodigy, master of control. His name rattled through boardrooms and newspapers like gospel, but none of it filled the emptiness that wrapped around him now. His tailored suit fit like armor, his jaw cut from steel, and yet behind the mask, there was only silence. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, and for the first time that night, Ethan's eyes shifted. A woman stepped into the bar, hesitant, her gaze sweeping the room like someone who'd wandered into a world she had only seen in movies. Isabella Reyes. 24 years old, though the exhaustion on her shoulders made her look older. Her life was stitched together by double shifts at a diner, late nights at the clinic, endless pages of nursing textbooks, and bills that seemed to multiply no matter how hard she worked. Her mother's illness weighed heavier than any debt, yet tonight she had let herself be convinced, by a friend who never showed, that she deserved one moment to breathe. She wore a simple black dress, the kind bought secondhand, the fabric hugging her slender figure just enough to spur elegance without pretending to be wealth. One loose strand of dark hair slipped across her cheek as she tucked it nervously behind her ear. She felt the eyes of the room, the subtle judgment of women dripping in diamonds, men who had never worried about rent in their lives. Her throat tightened, but she lifted her chin, refusing to shrink. Ethan noticed her instantly. It was impossible not to. In a room glittering with polish, she was raw, unvarnished, no designer gown, no rehearsed smirk, no hunger in her eyes for the man with billions. She was not here to conquer. She was simply present, and it shook him in a way he had not expected. Their eyes met across the crowded bar. For a heartbeat, time faltered. Isabella's breath caught at the intensity of his gaze, sharp as steel, yet strangely searching. She looked away too quickly, embarrassed by the heat in her cheeks, as if she had trespassed into something forbidden. Ethan's lips curved faintly, a smile so rare it almost startled him. She moved to the bar, shoulders squared, though her fingers trembled against the strap of her worn bag. Ordering the cheapest cocktail on the menu, she spoke softly, but without apology. Ethan studied her from his corner, curiosity coiling through him like smoke. She didn't belong here, not by the rules this world had written, and yet in some way she belonged more than anyone else. He turned his gaze back to the skyline, though the pull was already there, an invisible thread binding him to her across the room. He could feel her presence as though she had shifted the air itself. Ethan Carter was not a man who ignored instinct, and something inside him whispered that the girl in the thrift store dress might be the one thing capable of breaking his carefully constructed empire of control.
Isabella took a careful sip of her drink, steadying herself against the weight of unseen eyes. She told herself she was only another face in the crowd, that no one important could possibly notice her. But when she glanced again, she found him still watching. The man who looked like he owned the city, the man whose name she had read in headlines, staring at her as though she were the only person on the rooftop. Her pulse raced. His gaze did not waver. And somewhere, in the electric silence stretched between them, fate stitched its first thread. The night pressed closer around the rooftop bar as laughter swelled from a group of wealthy men at the far end, their voices carrying above the soft jazz like cracks of thunder. One of them, a man with a thick gold watch and a predatory smile, let his gaze linger far too long on Isabella. He nudged his companions with a smirk before standing and swaggering toward her. His steps heavy with entitlement, Isabella felt the shift before he spoke. Her shoulders tensed as he slid into the empty stool beside her. Uninvited. You don't look like you belong here, sweetheart. His voice was sticky with arrogance. Lucky for you, I don't mind sharing my company. His cologne hit her in a wave, sharp and suffocating. She gripped her glass tighter, fighting the urge to flinch. I'm fine, thank you, she said firmly, but her words rolled off him like rain on steel. The man leaned closer, invading her space. Let me buy you a real drink, not that cheap cocktail. He reached for her glass, fingers poised to pluck it away. But before he could touch it, another hand shot out strong and unyielding Ethan's hand. His grip clamped around the intruder's wrist with quiet force. The room seemed to hush for an instant. She said, She's fine. Ethan's voice was low, smooth, yet edged with steel, and when she says she's fine, you listen. The man blinked, startled, then forced a laugh. Relax, Carter, we're up. Our friends here? Ethan's gaze sharpened colder than the glass towers outside. We're not friends now, leave. The man pulled his hand back, muttering curses as he retreated. His companions suddenly eager to disappear into the night. Isabella's pulse raced, her breath uneven. She turned to Ethan, anger flashing behind her wide eyes. You didn't have to do that. Ethan's gaze held hers, unwavering. Yes, I did. She shook her head, torn between gratitude and indignation. I could have handled it. His lips curved into a smirk. Maybe, but why should you have to? His words sank into her like a stone into water, ripples spreading through every thought before she could answer. He leaned against the bar, his presence dominating the space around them, his eyes studying her with unnerving intensity as though peeling back every layer she tried to hide. You don't strike me as someone who comes to places like this, he said quietly. What brings you here tonight? Isabella hesitated, staring down at the condensation sliding along her glass. I just needed a change of scenery, she whispered, the truth slipping out before she could stop it. Ethan tilted his head, intrigued. You stand out. You know that? She let out a soft, humorless laugh. What gave me away? The dress or the fact that I ordered the cheapest drink, both Ethan admitted, and the fact that you're not trying to impress anyone. That alone makes you rare. Her cheeks warmed under his words. She lifted her chin with quiet defiance. Maybe I'm not here to stand out yet. You do. Ethan murmured, his voice dropping low enough that only she could hear. The air between them tightened, charged with something unspoken. Isabella's heartbeat thudded in her ears. She told herself not to be pulled in, not to believe that a man like him could look at her differently, but the spark had already caught when his eyes lingered on her. She felt as though she was the only person on the rooftop. The city light was blazing around them, yet paling in comparison to the fire that had just begun to burn in his gaze.
The rooftop bar emptied slowly as the hour grew late, but Ethan and Isabella remained locked in a strange orbit. The city below throbbed with restless energy, neon flashing like a pulse in the veins of Manhattan. When Ethan suggested walking with her, she almost refused, but the word yes slipped past her lips before she could stop it. They stepped into the elevator, the silence thick around them. Isabella hugged her bag to her chest, her mind screaming at her to be cautious, yet her heart already betraying her when the doors slid open. They were greeted by the glow of midnight streets, the hum of engines, the laughter of strangers. Ethan walked with measured strides, his hands in his pockets as though the world bowed to his pace. Isabella's steps were smaller, quicker, her heels clicking nervously against the pavement. "You seem nervous." Ethan observed, his voice casual, yet carrying a weight that made her shiver. "I'm walking through Manhattan at midnight with a billionaire I just met," she replied, her tone sharp, but her lips curved despite herself. "Nervous seems reasonable." Ethan chuckled, a sound low and unexpectedly warm. "If I wanted to hurt you, I wouldn't waste time with small talk." Isabella shot him a sideways glance. "That's supposed to make me feel better. You tell me," he smirked. They turned onto a quieter street lined with fairy lights strung through the branches of trees. The atmosphere shifted. The roar of the city softened into something intimate. Ethan slowed his pace, his eyes flicking down to her as though memorizing the tilt of her chin and the way her hair caught the light. "So, what's your story?" "Isabella Reyes?" he asked gently. "You don't end up in places like that rooftop bar by accident." Her breath caught. She wanted to guard herself, to shrug him off, but something in his gaze urged honesty. "I'm in nursing school," she admitted. "My days are work and study, nothing glamorous. A friend convinced me to take a night off, but she canceled. I came anyway." Ethan listened, his expression unreadable, but his silence felt like a thread pulling her deeper. She laughed softly, though it trembled, desperate. "Maybe. Sometimes I just want to forget the weight of everything. Debt, long hours, worry about my mom." The words slipped free, and once spoken, she couldn't take them back. Ethan's eyes softened, rare and dangerous. "Most people in that bar would never understand what you just said," he murmured. She looked down, embarrassed. "I'm not most people I know," Ethan said quietly. They entered Central Park, the lamps spilling pools of golden light across the paths, fallen leaves crunching beneath their shoes. The air was sharp, tinged with autumn. Isabella felt the closeness of him, the subtle brush of his arm near hers, every step a spark. She told herself it was madness, dangerous to be pulled toward a man like this, but her body betrayed her. Ethan stopped suddenly, turning to face her, his eyes burning with an intensity that made her knees weaken. "One night," he said softly. "No promises, no expectations, just you and me." Isabella froze, her breath catching the words hung between them, heavy with temptation and risk. She shook her head, more to herself than to him. "I don't do things like that." Ethan stepped closer, his voice low. "Neither do I, but something about you makes me want to break every rule I have." Her pulse raced. Logic screamed at her to walk away, but his nearness, his hunger stripped away her defenses. He reached up, brushing a stray strand of hair from her cheek, his touch achingly gentle. "Say yes," he whispered. Isabella closed her eyes, the city noise fading, the weight of bills and fear momentarily forgotten. She opened her eyes again and found him waiting, steel blue gaze locked on hers. "Just one night," she whispered. Ethan's lips curved, dark and satisfied. Just one night, though deep down they both knew it would never be that simple. The elevator ride to Ethan's penthouse felt endless. Isabella stood beside him, her hands clenched tight around the strap of her purse, her heart beating too loudly in her chest. She told herself she could still leave, that nothing tied her to this man, but every passing floor pulled her deeper into a choice she wasn't sure she wanted to make. When the doors slid open, she was met with a view so staggering she forgot how to breathe. The penthouse stretched wide, and gleaming floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the city sprawling beneath them, lights shimmering like a sea of fire against the darkness.
Sleek black furniture lined the space, polished marble floors reflected the glow of the skyline. The air smelled faintly of sandalwood, sharp and intoxicating. It felt less like a home and more like a fortress built for a king, a place where no weakness dared to exist. Ethan tossed his jacket across a chair, his movements deliberate, unhurried, his eyes never leaving her. Isabella hovered near the entrance, her pulse racing, unsure if she should step further inside. "Impressed?" he asked, his voice low-edged with curiosity. "It's beautiful," she admitted, though a small part of her thought it looked like a museum, cold and untouchable. Ethan poured himself whiskey, offered her one. She shook her head, her throat too dry for anything stronger than water. He respected her choice. Setting his glass aside, the silence thickened, charged with an energy neither of them could ignore. Ethan walked closer, his presence overwhelming, every step pulling her further into his orbit. "I should go," she whispered, though her feet refused to move. His lips curved faintly. "Do you want to?" Her chest tightened, torn between fear and longing. She shook her head slowly. No, that single word unraveled the restraint in his eyes. He closed the space between them, towering over her, his hand lifted, brushing against her cheek, the touch gentle but brimming. "With unspoken promises, then stay," he whispered. His thumb traced along her jawline, sending shivers down her spine. Her breath caught, her resolve crumbling. She leaned into his touch against every reason screaming in her mind. Ethan bent his head, his lips hovering just above hers. "Tell me you want this." His voice husky, raw with desire. Isabella's body trembled as she whispered, "I do." That was all it took. His mouth claimed hers, fierce and consuming his hands, pulling her against him as though he couldn't bear the distance. Her fingers tangled in his shirt, anchoring herself as the world tilted beneath her. The kiss deepened, every nerve igniting her knees, weakening under the heat of him. When his lips finally broke away, she gasped for air. Ethan pressed his forehead against hers, his voice rough. "You drive me insane." His hands roamed her back, tracing her spine, his hunger tempered with reverence, yet as his touch moved lower, she stiffened. Ethan sensed it immediately, pulling back, his sharp eyes searching. "What is it?" he asked gently. Isabella's cheeks flushed, her lips trembled. "I've never—" she faltered, the confession spilling before she could hide it. Ethan froze, realization striking. "You're a virgin." The word hung heavy in the air. Her face burned with shame. She braced for mockery, rejection, anything. Instead, his expression shifted, his steel mask cracking into something raw. "Damn it, Isabella, you should have told me." His hands cupped her face with surprising tenderness. "It matters more than you know," she whispered. "I thought it didn't." He exhaled sharply, his thumb brushing her trembling lips. "It matters more than anything."
For the first time in years, control slipped from him, the thought that she had given him something untouched. Sacred filled him with an ache he couldn't explain. His voice dropped rough and unsteady. "I need you, but only if you're sure." Isabella searched his eyes, saw sincerity buried beneath the storm. "I'm sure," she whispered. Ethan's restraint shattered his lips, crashed onto hers again, this time slower, deeper, pouring every ounce of hunger and reverence into the moment as he guided her toward the bedroom, both knowing one night had already become something neither of them could ever forget. The first light of dawn spilled through the glass walls of Ethan's penthouse, painting the room in shades of gold. Isabella stirred beneath the silk sheets, her body aching with the memory of the night. Her eyes blinked open, and for a fleeting second she felt safe. His arm was heavy around her waist, his grip possessive even in sleep, as if he feared she might slip away if he let go. She lay still, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her cheek. It felt dangerously comforting, too comforting. Ethan's eyes opened sharp, even through the haze of morning. The moment they met hers, his gaze softened morning. He murmured, his voice husky, rough from the night. Isabella flushed, turning her face into his chest. "Good," she whispered. Ethan's lips curved, but the glint in his eyes was darker, more intense. "Good, because I'm not done with you, Isabella." Her breath caught her chest tightening. She should have told him. It was only one night. She should have pulled away. But when he kissed her again, slow and consuming, her protest dissolved. When his mouth finally left hers, she whispered, "We barely know each other." His jaw tightened. "Then we'll change that." She shook her head, panic flickering. This isn't my world. Ethan, his eyes burned with something fierce, his voice dropping low. Then forget the world, you belong to me now. The words made her tremble, torn between fear and longing. She pushed weakly against his chest, her voice breaking. I can't pretend my life disappears just because you say so. I have responsibilities. I have my mother, my debts. You don't understand. Ethan studied her, his mask slipping for the briefest moment, his voice quieter. Do you regret last night? No, she admitted, truth spilling raw across her lips. His hands tightened on her waist, his lips brushed her temple. Then don't run from me. But the truth was, Isabella was already running in her heart. She slipped from the bed, pulling the sheet around her body. She stood at the window, staring at the sprawling city below her reflection, faint against the glass. Ethan rose, pulling on his pants, his gaze never leaving her. Talk to me, he urged Isabella, hugged the sheet closer. I'm not someone you can just claim. My life isn't yours to control. Ethan moved behind her, his reflection towering over hers in the glass. I can fix everything. You're drowning and I won't let you. Isabella turned eyes wide with both fear and yearning. It's not that simple. Ethan lowered his head, lips brushing her temple. It is now you're mine. His certainty terrified her as much as it thrilled her. The following days blurred for Ethan. Meetings and contracts lost all meaning, his mind consumed by her. He dismissed his assistant with a sharp command and reached for his phone. Find out everything about Isabella Reyes, where she lives, where she works, her debts, her family, every detail on my desk within the hour. The machine of his empire shifted at once. Across the city, Isabella tried to return to her life, tying her apron at the diner, studying between tables, checking her mother's prescriptions. She told herself the night was a mistake, a dangerous detour, but his face haunted her every quiet moment. His touch echoed in her dreams. Then the storm broke. She returned home one evening to find a pile of envelopes shoved under her door, red stamped overdue. Final notice payment required. Her chest tightened as she tore them open, each one a reminder of how close she was to drowning. Rent, tuition, medical bills. Her hands shook as she sank onto her couch, tears stinging her eyes. She whispered promises to herself that she would survive somehow. But when she opened her account later that night, ready to schedule a desperate partial payment, she froze. The balance was zero. The debt was gone. Her breath hitched, fury rising hot and sharp because she knew exactly who had done it. Her phone buzzed as if on cue, Ethan's message appearing. One word. Yes, she typed back fast, fingers trembling. You had no right. His reply came instantly. I had every right. You're mine. I take care of what's mine. Isabella threw the phone aside, tears of rage and unwanted relief burning her eyes. She hated him for crossing the line, hated herself for feeling the weight on her chest lift for the first time in months she could breathe. Yet the air carried his name, every breath whispering, Ethan Carter. The night air outside her apartment was heavy with rain when Isabella heard the knock. It was not gentle, not hesitant. It was the kind of knock that carried ownership. She opened the door and there he stood. Ethan Carter. Dark suit, immaculate storm still clinging to his shoulders, his eyes blazing with determination. Before she could speak, he stepped past her into the small apartment, the space shrinking instantly beneath his presence. You can't just walk in here. She snapped, her voice sharp but trembling. Ethan turned slowly, his frame filling the room, his voice low. I can, and I will. You are mine. Isabella, and I won't stand by while you suffer when I can change it. Her chest burned with fury. You paid my debts without asking. You invaded my life. This isn't your choice. His J. You tightened. His tone deepened. I'm not buying anything. I'm claiming what's already mine. Her eyes widened with anger. I'm not property. Ethan's expression softened, but the intensity in his gaze never wavered. You're not property. You're everything I didn't know I needed, and I'll do whatever it takes to keep you. Isabella's heart pounded, torn between fury and a dangerous longing. He stepped closer, the scent of sandalwood clinging to him, intoxicating. Stop trying to fight me, he murmured. You feel it too. I see it in your eyes. Her lips parted, words ready to fight him off, but when his hand cupped her cheek, her breath caught the fire between them, reignited raw and unstoppable. She turned her head, breaking free, her voice shaking. You can't control me. His smirk curved, both infuriating and devastating. Watch me. Before she could respond,
His mouth claimed hers, the kiss fierce, desperate, a collision of anger and hunger. She pushed against his chest, her fists striking weakly even as her body melted into him, her resistance betrayed by the way her hands clung to his shirt when he pulled back. His breath was ragged, his eyes wild with obsession. "I won't let you go, Isabella, no matter how hard you fight." Her legs trembled. She backed away, pacing across the narrow living room, her arms folding tight as though she could shield herself from the gravity of him. Ethan stood near the door, shoulders squared, his gaze locked, unyielding. "You can't keep doing this, Ethan," she shouted. "You can't fix everything with money and think it gives you the right to own me. This is my life, my freedom." His eyes darkened, his voice dropping to a growl. "And you think I don't know freedom? I built mine from nothing. I clawed my way to the top, and for the first time I'm willing to give up control because of you. Do you even understand what that means?"
The words struck her like lightning, the room thick with silence. She wanted to tell him he was insane, wanted to drive him away, but when she looked into his eyes, she saw not only obsession, but vulnerability, a man terrified of losing what he had just found. Her voice cracked. "Why me?" Ethan stepped forward, his tone raw. "Because you're real, because you don't want me for my money or my empire, because when you look at me, I'm not Ethan Carter, the billionaire. I'm just a man." Her chest ached, tears stinging her eyes. "That doesn't change the fact that our worlds don't fit. I'm drowning in bills and fear, and you live in a palace of glass where every problem disappears with a phone call. How could this ever work?" Ethan cupped her face gently, his voice rough. "Because I'll make it work, because I can't lose you." His lips captured hers before she could speak again, the kiss searing, desperate, igniting a storm in her veins. Her fists pressed weakly against his chest, but instead of pushing him away, she clung to him, the truth breaking through her walls. She wanted him. She wanted him, even when logic screamed, "No." Ethan's forehead rested against hers, his whisper fierce. "Say it. Tell me you don't want me, and I'll leave." Isabella closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek, the words stuck in her throat. She wanted to tell him to walk away, but when her lips parted, only one truth escaped. "I can't." Ethan exhaled sharply, his grip tightening, his stormy gaze locked on hers. "Then stop running from me." The air between them burned with obsession and surrender, and in that moment, as his arms pulled her against him, Isabella knew her life was no longer her own. The ballroom shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers, light scattering across polished marble floors and golden arches, the air thick with perfume, champagne, and the hum of a string orchestra. It was the kind of place where power wore silk and diamonds, where whispers carried more weight than speeches. Isabella stood at the entrance, her hands trembling against the fabric of the gown Ethan had insisted she wear. The midnight silk clung to her every step, reminding her she did not belong among titans. Ethan walked beside her like he owned the world, which in some ways he did. His hand rested firm against the small of her back, guiding her through the crowd, his black suit sharp, his presence commanding. Heads turned as they passed, voices lowered, the whispers beginning already. Who is she? Why her? Isabella's stomach twisted tighter with each glance, every curious smile hiding judgment. She leaned toward him, her voice breaking. "I don't belong here, Ethan." His eyes flicked down cold and unwavering. "You belong wherever I say you do." The words sent a shiver racing through her, half fear, half desire. She kept her chin high even as doubt gnawed at her. Ethan introduced her to CEOs, senators, and women dripping in jewels. "My date," he said simply, his tone final yet, their smiles thin and sharp. Isabella forced polite answers, her pulse pounding each question, a reminder that she was an outsider. She excused herself, eventually, drifting to the tall windows, staring out at the city lights blurred through unshed tears. She whispered to herself, "What am I doing here?" The sound of footsteps behind her froze her. She turned, expecting another guest, but it was Ethan, his reflection towering beside hers in the glass. "You're overwhelmed," he said quietly. She nodded, her voice soft. "They don't see me as one of them, and they're right. I'm not." Ethan's eyes darkened. "Do you care what they think?" She swallowed. "I care about not losing myself." His hand lifted, tilting her chin toward him. "You won't lose yourself. You'll find yourself with me." Before she could protest, he took her hand, leading her back into the center of the ballroom.
Conversations faltered, all eyes drawn to the CEO known for ruthlessness, now pulling a young woman under the spotlight. Ethan claimed the microphone from the host, his voice carrying with effortless command. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we gather for a cause greater than profit. But before we continue, there is something I must say." Isabella's heart slammed against her ribs as he drew her forward, the spotlight blinding. She tried to pull back. Ethan's grip tightened, whispers rippled like knives slicing through the silence. "This is Isabella Reyes," he said, his voice steady. "She is not just my date, she is my future." Gasps echoed through the room. Isabella's knees wobbled, her throat dry. Ethan turned fully toward her, ignoring the crowd, his hand steady as he sank to one knee. The image, shocking, powerful, a diamond ring catching fire beneath the chandeliers. "Isabella. The moment I saw you, I knew my life would never be the same," he said, his voice raw. "I don't want another night without you. I don't want another future that doesn't have you in it. Marry me." The world spun, gasps filled the air, her lips parted, words caught in her throat. She wanted to scream. This was madness, that she wasn't ready, that she could not step into this life. But when she looked down at him, saw the fierce vulnerability in his gaze, her heart cracked wide open. Tears stung her eyes, her lips trembling. "Ethan," she whispered, but the weight of the crowd pressed down. Panic surged. She shook her head. "I can't. This is too much." Whispers erupted, sharp judgment flooding the air. Ethan rose, slowly, towering once more, his expression unreadable but pain flickering beneath the mask. He leaned close, his whisper fierce. "You can deny me in front of them if you must, but you can't deny what's between us. You are mine. Whether the world knows it tonight or later, it's no difference." Her tears spilled, the orchestra resuming awkwardly as the host reclaimed the microphone, trying to restore order. But the moment lingered, etched into every eye in the room. Isabella's heart pounded as Ethan's arm wrapped once more around her waist, guiding her off the stage with the same unshakable certainty as before. She had refused him before the city's elite, yet, as his hand anchored her against him, she realized with terror and longing alike her life would never again belong only to her. The days after the gala blurred into a storm of whispers and headlines. Isabella's face splashed across finance blogs and gossip columns. Some called her a fairy tale, some called her a fraud, the young woman who dared refuse New York's most ruthless billionaire. Her phone buzzed endlessly, reporters at the door, neighbors whispering her name like poison. She hid in her apartment blinds, drawn heart thundering every time the phone rang. When Ethan finally came, he did not knock softly. He entered with the same force he had carried into her life, the door closing behind him with a heavy finality. "You've been avoiding me." His voice was calm, but beneath it coiled danger. Isabella's fists clenched at her sides. "What did you expect? You humiliated me in front of half the city. You asked me to marry you under a spotlight. I couldn't even breathe." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I don't care about them. I only care about you." "I meant every word. You are my future." Her eyes burned with tears, but she shook her head. "Our worlds are too different. I'll never belong in yours. I don't want to become someone I don't recognize." He crossed the room in 2 strides, his hands gripping her shoulders, forcing her to meet his gaze. "Listen to me. You don't have to change who you are. That's what makes you mine. I don't want polished perfection. I want you, the woman who fights me, the woman who makes me feel human." Her lips trembled, and for a moment, she let herself believe him, but the fear clawed back. And what about when it gets worse? What about when the headlines get uglier, when people tear me apart? Ethan's expression softened, though his grip stayed firm. "Then let me be strong, for both of us. Let me protect you the way I've wanted to since the first night I saw you." The silence that followed pressed heavy between them. Isabella's chest heaved with ragged breaths, her voice cracked. "I love you, Ethan. God help me, I love you. But I'm scared." His breath caught, his grip tightening slightly, as if to anchor himself to her confession, his forehead lowered to hers. "Then let's be scared together, because I cannot imagine my life without you." Her tears spilled freely as she nodded. Walls breaking after weeks of resisting his arms pulled her against him, crushing her to his chest. His lips captured hers in a kiss that stole the last of her defenses. It was not a kiss of possession, but of surrender, of need, of devotion. Their mouths clashed with fire and desperation. Her fists pressed to his chest, then tangled in his shirt, dragging him closer. When he finally pulled away, his eyes were stormy, his voice raw. "You are mine."
Isabella, not because I bought you, not because I claimed you, but because you gave me something I never thought I would have, your love." Her chest ached with the truth, her whisper unsteady. "Then don't break me." Ethan cupped her face, his voice fierce. "I'd rather burn the world than break you." They held each other as if letting go would tear them apart. Outside, the city, roared headlines, sharpened whispers spread, but inside that small apartment, the war between fear and desire ended in a fragile peace, sealed by love and the dangerous vow of a man who would never let her go. The wedding came faster than anyone expected. It was the kind of event that would normally take months of planning, yet Ethan made it happen. Pen in weeks, his empire moved like a machine, orchestrating every detail. Chandeliers polished until they sparkled like stars. Violins rehearsing melodies that would linger in memory gowns. Fitted rings chosen. The city buzzed with speculation. Was this a power play? Was this real? No one knew, but everyone wanted to watch. Isabella stood in front of the mirror in a dressing room lined with silk and gold. Her hands trembled against the lace of her gown, her reflection staring back at her like a stranger. She whispered to herself, "I can still walk away." Her heart pounded, but when the door opened and Ethan stepped inside, breaking tradition, breaking rules, she froze. His eyes locked on her with a hunger that stole her breath. He moved toward her slowly, as if afraid she might vanish. "You look like fire and light," he said, his voice rough. She turned quickly, trying to hide her nerves. "Ethan, this is madness. I don't know if I'm ready." He took her hands, pressing them against his chest. "Feel this," he whispered. His heartbeat thundered under her palms, steady and wild. At once, "You are ready because you're already mine." She swallowed hard, tears burning her eyes. "You scare me, Ethan." His lips curved faintly. "Good, because you terrify me too, and that's how I know it's real." The ceremony was held beneath a ceiling of crystal light. Hundreds of eyes watching the billionaire known for ice, now standing with a woman no one expected, vows spoken, not in the language of wealth, but of raw truth. Ethan's voice broke when he promised her loyalty, his empire, his life. Isabella's voice trembled when she promised her heart, her future, her fear and her love when the officiant declared them husband and wife. Ethan did not hesitate. He cupped her face and kissed her fiercely, silencing every whisper, every doubt, every enemy who doubted her place by his side. But beneath the shimmer of celebration, shadows lingered. Some guests smiled too widely, their eyes glinting with malice. Investors murmured behind champagne glasses. Journalists scribbled stories that would cut like knives. Isabella felt it even in the warmth of Ethan's embrace. The world was waiting for them to fall. Later that night, when the ballroom had emptied and the city lay quiet beyond the glass, Ethan held her on the balcony, the skyline burning below. He pressed his lips to her temple, whispering, "You're safe now. No one can touch you." But as Isabella looked out over the city, her heart whispered a truth she could not ignore. She was his. Yes, but the world outside would not rest until it tested the vow they had just made, and somewhere deep inside she knew the storm was only beginning. A year passed, and the Carter penthouse no longer felt like a museum. Its cold marble softened by warm rugs, its silence broken by the small coos of a baby girl, her laughter echoing louder than any boardroom victory. Isabella sat on the couch in a simple sundress, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, cradling their daughter with a smile that carried both peace and disbelief. Ethan stood nearby, sleeves rolled, tie undone, rocking the child's tiny hand in his palm. The billionaire who once commanded cities, now undone by the giggle of his daughter. Isabella watched him, her chest swelling with love and fear all at once. This was the man who had declared her his, who had dragged her into a storm she never thought she could survive. Yet here he was, bending low to press a kiss to their child's forehead, his steel blue eyes soft in a way no one else would ever see. She whispered softly, "Do you ever regret it?" Ethan turned to her, gaze fierce. "Not for a second. That night when you gave yourself to me changed everything, you and her. You are all that matters." His words warmed her. But later that night, when the city slept and their daughter dreamed, Isabella wandered the penthouse, unable to quiet the storm inside her. She found herself in Ethan's study, a room he kept locked yet. Tonight the door had been left ajar, papers stacked neatly, files tucked away. Curiosity gnawed at her.
She reached for one, her heart stopping as she read inside were records of debts, erased, hospital bills, silenced overdue, rent, paid off, even notes of job offers that had mysteriously vanished, all tied to her name. Her hands shook, the truth slicing through her. Ethan had not just saved her. He had controlled her life in ways she never imagined, every step, every choice bent by his invisible hand. Her chest tightened with anger, with betrayal, yet beneath the fury, another truth whispered, without his interference, would she even be here? Would she have survived long enough to hold their daughter? The door creaked behind her. Ethan stood in the shadows, his expression unreadable, his voice low. "You weren't supposed to see that." Isabella turned, tears burning her eyes. "You pulled every string, every choice I ever had. You took it away." His jaw clenched. "I gave you freedom. I gave you everything. I made sure you'd never drown again." Her voice cracked. "No, you made sure I could never escape you." Silence stretched heavy as thunder. Her tears spilled down her cheeks. Ethan stepped closer, his eyes dark, storm colliding with desperation. "I would burn this city to ash before I lost you, Isabella. You terrify me more than anything else because you are the one thing I cannot control." She trembled, torn between rage and love, between the prison of his obsession and the safety of his arms. She whispered, "Broken. I should hate you." Ethan lowered his forehead to hers, his voice fierce. "Then hate me, but don't ever leave me." Their daughter's soft cry echoed from the other room, the sound cutting through the storm. Isabella's tears fell as she whispered, "God help me, you are my Ford." Ver. Ethan's arms wrapped around her, pulling her into his chest. The city beyond their windows gleamed uncaring. The empire outside waited to test them, but inside that room a vow was sealed, not with purity but with obsession, fear, and a love so consuming it could not be undone.